Have you ever taken one of those personality tests? Maybe in a magazine or online? A few years ago, the Myers-Briggs was a popular one. That was the one with the 4 letters, and maybe you would be a INTP or ESFJ. A more recent one I've seen is called the Enneagram, which gives you a number between 1 and 8. Or you might have seen the online tests that are, what kind of pasta are you, or what kind of Disney princess? Personally, I'm Moana. I think it's interesting to take those sorts of tests and see what sort of personality traits they address by the different questions. And what we're looking at today is the idea of meekness. And some people might think that that's just a personality trait, meek or quiet, as opposed to extroverted and forceful. So when Jesus says to his listeners there on the Sermon on the Mount, "Blessed are the meek," he's not just talking about a personality, he's also talking about a status, of way of being. And of course, the nation of Israel at that time, they were occupied by Rome. They had Roman soldiers taking their money, bossing them around, doing things to them all the time. They were in a humble and meek position as compared to their Roman oppressors. So like when Jesus says later on in the Sermon on the Mount, if someone strikes you on the cheek, turn them the other also, or if someone demands your coat, give them also your cloak. That was because that's what the Roman soldiers were doing to them. They were going around just hitting people, demanding things, saying, "Here's my equipment, you carry this for me." The people that Jesus is addressing in the Beatitudes, when he says, "Blessed are the meek," that was because they were meek. When I think of the word meek, it's not really a word that we use nowadays, so it makes me think of maybe like a little mouse or a shy, timid person, or maybe even baby Jesus on a Christmas card, meek and mild. But actually, the word meek that is translated in this passage and how I want to look at it, it's not about personality, it's about power, as in power under control. So imagine a horse, a rodeo horse, bucking and kicking and trying to throw the rider off its back. And now picture instead a racehorse, which is guided by the jockey to still have power to run fast, but now directed on the race course. Both horses have power and strength, but one of those horses is controlled in the direction that the rider wants it to go. Or maybe imagine instead a balloon. While the balloon is inflated, all the air inside is being controlled by the latex on the outside of that balloon. But as soon as the balloon is popped, that air whoosh goes out into the atmosphere and the balloon might go off onto a crazy path. Or maybe consider your oven. Now, your oven has the capacity to be turned up full blast, high heat, but you hardly ever do that. More often, you turn the knob to a place where it's controlled. Power to cook your food, but under control. Now, if you look at the passage in the book of 1 Samuel, around about chapter 26, this is one of the stories of David. Now, you'll remember that David was told that he was going to be king over Israel as a young boy, but the other king, Saul, didn't really like that. And lots of things happened. David killed Goliath. David served in Saul's court for a while. But then when we get to this passage in 1 Samuel 26, Saul is not happy with David, and he and his army are trying to kill him. And what happens here, and you can read it for yourself, David comes upon Saul in his tent while Saul is asleep. And David has the opportunity to kill him and to take the throne of Israel. But he doesn't. He has self-control because he says, "Who am I to lay a hand on the Lord's anointed? As surely as the Lord lives, the Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish." But David is controlling the power that he had in that situation. Instead of killing Saul, he just takes his water jug to prove that he was there. Or a similar example is Jesus in Luke 4, tempted in the desert. The devil tempts Jesus to ease his body's hunger by saying, "Make food out of just these stones." Or he says you could just have authority over the kingdoms of the world, or you could have these death-defying feats by throwing yourself off the building. You don't have to be like these humans, the devil was saying to Jesus. But Jesus, who had the ultimate power and authority, controlled it to show to us that when we face temptation, we also have the ability to control ourselves. Now, we might not be in a position like David to assassinate a king, or like Jesus in the desert to make food out of bread, but we all have power to create chaos, to wound people, to tear people down instead of building them up. However, we also have the gift of God's Spirit, the fruit of the Holy Spirit that grows in us, and one of the things that grows in us is self-control. It helps us to control our words, to control our attitudes, our actions, to think about others as well as thinking about ourselves. Being meek in this situation isn't about weak, let people walk all over us like a doormat. It's about controlling the power that we have, our potential for destruction, and instead change that potential for what God wants us to do. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. But it still feels like the bossy and the pushy get power, get elected, get to do what they want. Those squeaky wheels just keep getting that grease. But Jesus promised his fellow Israelites and us that God has an inheritance for us, that we don't have to push and put down and destroy in order to get the good gifts that God has planned for us, because we have inheritance coming our way. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Whenever I was pregnant, I always craved McDonald's cheeseburgers. There's something about them, that maybe it was the onions or the salty gherkins or the sweet ketchup, that my body said it needed. Of course, I always said it was the baby that needed it. Have you ever craved anything, whether you've been pregnant or not? Has there ever been a food that you really wanted? Or maybe you were desperate for a drink on a hot day or on a long walk, just gasping for a drink. There's a new word that people have made up, hangry. It's a combination of hungry and angry, and it's when you're so hungry that your attitude is just cross and irritated with other people. And it is true that being hungry can change your behavior and affect the words that you say, and even affect the way that you act towards other people. And I wonder, does being hungry for God have the same effect? Can you notice a change in your behavior, in your words, and your love for others when you've been filling yourself with the things of God, or when you're starving for them? In Mark 5:25 to verse 34, it tells a beautiful story about a woman who had been suffering for many years with a disease that caused bleeding. And because of the nature of her disease, she wasn't allowed to be near anyone in her village or her family. She wasn't allowed to touch anyone. But as Jesus was walking through her village, she was desperate for something to change in her life. So even though she knew she shouldn't, she reached out to touch the hem of his garment, hoping for healing, knowing that she could be in a lot of trouble and perhaps he'd be really angry about it. But he wasn't. He could feel the power going to her from himself. He could feel her being healed. Her longing was brought to fulfillment by Jesus' power. Over the past few weeks and months, there have been lots of things that we have missed and longed for. I know at the beginning, my kids yearned to play in playgrounds. I know many of you missed your grandchildren desperately. We all missed getting together with our friends. We missed the activities we used to do. We desperately missed and hungered to get together as a church for worship. Some of those things we can do now, some of the things that we're still waiting on, and the government seems to change what we can do all the time. So we can relate to this feeling of wanting, of aching for things to be different. But Jesus said when we long for God, like a yearning in our souls, like a hunger in our stomachs, that's good, that's blessed, because we're going to be filled. He said in John 6:35, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. But we have to actually be filled to be filled. Confused? Here's a way of thinking about it. Imagine you go to a restaurant and look through the menu. Everything sounds delicious. You're not sure what to choose. Then the waiter comes to your table and explains the special dishes available, and some of them are your absolute favorite foods. But then instead of ordering and eating, you just fold up your menu, get up and walk out. That would be a silly thing to do. So we can't just let other people tell you about food and think that that's going to fill up your stomach. And in the same way, we can't rely on other people to tell us about God. You have to read the word yourself. You have to, with your eyes, look at it, or with your ears, hear it yourself. You have to pray yourself. You have to spend time listening to God yourself, taking the time to feast on God's love yourself, not just having someone else tell you about it, and then we will be filled. Now here is an absolute beautiful passage from Isaiah 25, 6-9. This is talking about the future kingdom, about God's heaven. On this mountain, the Lord Almighty will prepare a feast of rich food for all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, the best of meats, and the finest of wines. On this mountain he will destroy the shroud that enfolds all peoples, the sheet that covers all nations. He will swallow up death forever. The sovereign Lord will wipe away the tears from all faces. He will remove his people's disgrace from all the earth. The Lord has spoken. In that day they will say, surely this is our God. We trusted in him, and he saved us. The feast God is preparing for us will be a celebration of his victory over death, that swallowing up of death forever. And as we approach the table, it will be with tears in our eyes from the sorrow we have suffered, but tears also for the comfort we receive, for the relief of that victory, for the joy of being in his presence. And God himself will wipe away our tears. He will take us by the hand and lead us to that table where our hunger and thirst for righteousness will be satisfied forever. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst, because they will be filled. As we listen to our next song, Lord of Eternity, I just encourage you to think about these ideas. To think about whether or not you feel like a person who is meek, who is humiliated, and for God to give you comfort in your situation. Or maybe you feel like your power is out of control. You need some self-control to help you with some of the destructive things that are causing you to hurt yourself and others. Or maybe you just need to pray for God to fill you and to stoke that hunger for the things of him. So as we listen to this song, just encourage you to reach out to the Lord and ask him to give you what you need.
Blessed is the man who walks in your favor, who loves all your words and hides them like treasure. In the darkest place of his desperate heart, they are a light, a strong, sure light. Sometimes I call out your name, but I cannot find you. I look for your face, but you are not there. By my sorrows, Lord, lift me to you. Lift me up to your side. Lord of eternity, Father of mercy, look on my touch me and make me whole. If you are my defender, who is against me? No one can trouble or harm me if you are my strength. All I ask, all I desire is to live in your house all my days. Lord of eternity, God of all mercy, come to my troubled soul. Keeper of all the stars, friend of the poorest heart, touch me